begin with some literature, right? Even if you don't like literature, even if your idea of literature is flashy tabloid magazines full of celebrities and athletes kept in your bathroom, all right? Bear with me. Some of you, many maybe, I don't know, had to read at least an excerpt once upon a time in English class, John Milton's famous poem, Paradise Lost. It's how Milton imagined the fall of Satan, the fall of Lucifer and his angels into hell, and the fall of Adam and Eve into sin. The poem contains a very famous quote from the devil, from Lucifer, who gets renamed Satan. As he agitates for rebellion in heaven, full of pride and envy, he declares, "Better to reign in hell than serve in heaven." Nowadays, that's become sort of a cultural touchstone in the last, at least 70 years or so, for people who reject Christianity and what they see as its pie-in-the-sky morality and its own moral failures. Billy Joel paraphrased it for all the baby boomers, right? "I'd rather laugh with the sinners than cry with the saints. The sinners are much more fun." But think that through. Consider the heavy weight of its rebellion, pride, and envy. To reign in hell means to attempt to rule over people who are as bad as, even worse than you. How well do you think that will go? Herding cats, chasing after the wind would be more productive. In fact, you'd better lie, cheat, and steal your way to the top, or bottom maybe, as it were. Because God only knows what someone else will do to you if they get ahead of you in this hellish rat race. And hell is most certainly the place built of lies and deceptions. That's why we say the road to hell is paved with good intentions, because those so-called good intentions refuse to deal with reality in a true way, but rather subvert it. In fact, try it out if you want. Start lying about anything and just keep going and adding to it. In no time, you'll see what it is to reign over your own personal hell as you start building it for yourself. So often we hear this Bible story from St. Matthew as a snuggly, cuddly little bedtime story. Jesus is there for us when we're weary because he doesn't expect us to do hard things. There, little one, and all that. The story really ought to scare us a little bit. But we don't pick up everything Jesus is laying down in the account. See, Jesus is not here to affirm our contemporary notions of free will choices. In fact, the unspoken assumptions by those Jesus is speaking to are quite different from our coddled consumer ones. They knew what we don't. From the moment you're born, you're always hitched to something. Never in life are you free to choose or decide ultimate things from a place of neutrality, independence, and autonomy. No. For us, what become our baseline assumptions today are those of consumerism, that life is something to be bought and sold. The ability to buy and sell is called freedom, and the more we have to buy and sell, the more freedom we have. Like the real reason we complain about our local grocery store or restaurants is really that they don't offer us enough choices in canned beans or cheese enchiladas. And so if we had more beans or more enchiladas, we'd have more freedom and more prosperity, goes our thinking, or something like that. See, freedom isn't choices, whether it's choices in toothpaste or choices in politics, right? Either the formal voting kind or the informal kind, dealing with the consequences of human behavior, including our own. Freedom also isn't agency, right? The choice to act one way or another, right? We always have that in some things and not other things. Underneath all of these assumptions of freedom is the thinking that we are able, that we are free to choose between right and wrong. A deception that has plagued humankind since the apple in the Garden of Eden. If evil or wickedness or doing bad is a real or realistic choice, then one doesn't have real freedom. Would you click to the next slide, please? See, we've used this little reality check in Sunday morning Bible study many, many times. All right, we might call this lie free agency, right? Like pro sports. Forgetting that free agency didn't exist until the 70s, even though we take it for granted today. See, this is how we, wise and sophisticated as we are, think life works. The red X's are bad, the green pluses are good. And there in the middle, you see a plain white shape, independent and autonomous from the others. Neither red nor green, neither a plus nor an X. He lives in a little bubble of freedom and neutrality as he evaluates for himself the pros and cons of each side, weighing them to make his decision to be with the angels or the devils. He thinks that he exists in the middle on his own, owning himself and owing nothing to anyone from soup to nuts, even as regards his eternity. He's free to choose, as indicated by the little broken line. He can go in and out of his bubble. This is the air we breathe, and you can't understand why the title is Lie. Next slide, please. Here's the truth. And I added that fire just for a little bit of drama, all right? See, that permeable bubble of free agency is an illusion. See, everyone's trapped on the side of the red X's. I'm looking at it over here. Trapped on the side of the red X's, right? The side of sin and death, and the devil has a reserve clause on each one of us in perpetuity. It's what we recite in our weekly confession, that we are indeed born captive to sin and cannot free ourselves. We are hitched to this heavy burden from the moment we are born on this earth, and no amount of good behavior or making good choices, or at least better than ones, can change our reality. And so how do you get from the red side to the green side? All right, that's the $64,000 question. The barrier between the two is solid, not permeable, let alone open. Something other than ourselves will have to rescue us from the red to the green. In our gospel reading today, we hear Jesus say, "Come to me, all you that are weary and carrying heavy burdens, and I will give you rest." One more slide, please. See, he alone is the one who pulls us from one side to the other, bearing our bondage to sin, death, and the devil on the cross for us, so that we may enter into God's rest. Just as we learn from Martin Luther in the Small Catechism, he has redeemed me, a lost and condemned creature, purchased and won me from all sins, from death, from the power of the devil, not with gold or silver, but with his holy and precious blood, his innocent suffering and death, in order that I may be his own and live under him in his kingdom and serve him in everlasting righteousness, innocence, and blessedness. Now, all that's well and good and true, but what does it mean to go from one side to the other? Especially given our culture's assumption that the red side's actually freedom, while the green side is religion and restriction. See, we even read that backwards into Jesus' words. The wearying burdens on my life are at least my own free choices. Jesus would have me carry his instead. That's a good deal for him. No. See, we're all hitched one way or the other. Jesus' load is light and easy, especially compared to the load of sin, death, and the devil, the load of hell. Remember our earlier quote from Paradise Lost. Satan says, "Better to reign in hell than serve in heaven." That means it's better to have more sin and death, more lies and deception tied around your neck. Does that sound like a choice you want to make? Does it sound like freedom to have the freedom to have to keep up and get ahead in sin and death, lying and deception, does that sound like freedom? Not to me. What Jesus offers us is the burden of truth and goodness, which leads to life and salvation. Freedom we find in serving him is the freedom, finally, to do what's good and true, instead of being burdened by what's false, including half-truths, we might say, and being burdened by what's evil, right, or even the lesser of two evils, as we like to say. Just a few Sundays back, we heard Jesus say that he alone is the way, the truth, and the life. This is the burden he offers to us. This is what we are in service to, truth and goodness. It's a much easier yoke and a lighter burden. And it gives us rest rather than another wearying rat race in hell. Yes, indeed, from an eternal perspective, Jesus' yoke and burden, the freedom of service that he offers us is easier and lighter than the hellish alternative. I mean, just consider the wackiness of the rainbow revolution we're in the middle of. I mean, first, we merely had to say that women and men were essentially the same, only their physical biology differed, which seemed polite and like a good intention. But now we're supposed to say that men are really women, that women are women, and that infants are chest-fed by anyone. Now, none of that's true from an expansive biblical point of view or from a narrow biological science point of view. And yet, speaking that truth can get you fired, dismissed, debanked, otherwise canceled, and even investigated by the FBI. And of course, that's not to mention all of the ongoing COVID-19 and big pharma vaccine nonsense, right? And our complicity in it. Or wondering, as Richard Nixon once famously said, people have got to know whether or not their president is a crook. One more slide, please. Jesus' burden and yoke, truth and goodness, is easier than the devil's lies and evil. Jesus' burden doesn't change. It's eternal because it is he who is and was and will be the beginning and the end. Now, mind you, believing the right facts, holding the right opinions about Jesus isn't the same as bearing Jesus' load, being hitched to his yoke. No. To serve Jesus, who rescues you from bondage to sin, death, and the devil, is to take responsibility for the truth he tells you. And to pursue it all the way down into your inmost parts and to follow it to the furthest shore it leads you. Serving Jesus gives you a meaning and a purpose greater than your next choice at Walmart, Amazon, or Netflix, no matter how wise and sophisticated it makes you feel in front of your friends. This pursuit of truth over and against the powers and principalities that would quash it is an adventure for those willing to go. It's more interesting and more exciting than languishing another minute with lukewarm religion that you won't take too far or really anywhere at all. It answers to no politician, no bureaucrat, no human resources caring. It's hard work, yes, in a world of couch potatoes, pencil pushers, and folks biding their time until they can say they've done their time. But it's freedom. Freedom from the bad and the lies to pursue the good and the truth. Sure, the world around us will work against it and all who serve it. Jesus doesn't hide that from you. You heard that the last 2 Sundays. It's sort of a paradox. On the one hand is that old G.K. Chesterton quote. The Christian ideal has not been tried and found wanting. It's been found difficult and left untried. Right, on the one hand. But on the other hand, Jesus' burden and yoke are the only thing that can actually give you rest from hell's rat race of lies. The only thing that can unhitch you from the devil's burden of evil and death. So do what Jesus says to you. Come to him for what only he can give you. Amen.